All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we talked about the election of 1860 in class. We're talking about the response step by the South, which is to secede from the Union. So when this whole thing goes down, right, with the election of 1860, the South thinks they're done for. Something should leave, something they should fight. And what happens is South Carolina takes a vote in its own House legislature, and their vote is to leave the Union in 1861. Mississippi slowly follows, followed by our other four states, or our first six in the Confederacy: Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas. And this happens within a few months. Now, as going down here, the thing is that remember, Lincoln's not president yet, and so his group, as they vote to leave, start forming what they call the Confederacy. And it forms February 1861, and these states that are down here, the first six states, okay, starting here, South Carolina, Mississippi, Texas, and Florida, they make their own constitution, very much resemble the United States Constitution, with one big change, that they protected and recognized the use of slavery. And held their own elections, elected Jefferson Davis, this guy right here, as president. And he has, in his famous speech, he says, the time of compromise has now passed, basically meaning it's on, it's war, and it's not going to change anything. Now, the whole thing goes on here, and James Buchanan is still president of the United States. Lincoln's not in office. He's sitting there on his hands, can't do a gosh darn thing. Now, Buchanan sees his role as president a little bit different. He's like, hey, it's illegal, but I can't do anything about it because my job as president doesn't allow me to do anything about it. And so he basically comes out and says, listen, I can't do anything. And we're kind of putting this big question of, is there any way to fix the situation short of war? Which we're going to find out doesn't really happen. Well, Lincoln takes office in April, and his first thing, right away, he walks into a hornet's nest when there are forts that are in Southern Territory, but they are still Union forts. There's some in South Carolina, some down in Florida. And they figure what to do here. So he's got three choices. One, you can try and compromise, right? Like the idea of, can we make a deal to keep the forts and make something work, and try and solve the situation with the South. You can let the forts go, just abandon them and give the South all these guns and ammo and forts, that kind of deal. Or do you go to war? If you resupply the forts, you send troops there, it's probably going to be seen as an act of war, and you're going to have actual fighting take place, since now these forts are technically in foreign land. And remember, as we're looking at this potential war taking place, these capitals are less than 100 miles apart. And the goal of war back in the 18th, 19th century is always to go and, take over the capital. You have Richmond, Virginia, here in Richmond. You have Washington, D.C. Harper's Ferry is very, very close, being that U.S. Armory. A lot of this stuff is in one little area. So we see a lot of this fighting through Virginia, especially, and being kind of ravaged as this war takes place. And so you remember a reminder of Lincoln's election, kind of how the election turned out for him and where his supporters are. And I'm going to have you focus though on these couple states here in Kentucky and Missouri and Delaware and Maryland, because some voted for Breckinridge, some voted for Bell, some voted for Douglas. And as you kind of see, look at the pictures here, where you see the newspaper showing South Carolina's secession. You had the more states secede, and some more will try to secede later on. It's kind of the question of what's going to happen here. So the seceded states, they early on have their capital Montgomery. Later they'll move to Richmond, Virginia later on, because it's a bigger city, better city. Lincoln takes office. You see a picture of Lincoln's inaugural address. Notice the Capitol is still under construction. They're still building the dome. And here's his problem of Fort Sumter. So here's Fort Sumter, which is out here in the island. Okay. There it is. There we go. Okay. And all these are forts that are kind of around here guarding Charleston Harbor. And so Lincoln's problem is that Major Anderson, the guy in charge of this fort, says, hey, we're almost out of supplies. And we need ships to come in to resupply us with food, armor, ammunition, that kind of stuff. The Confederates say, listen, if you sail ships in that harbor, we're going to shoot you because it's an invasion of our space. And Lincoln is stuck with this problem, right? He has to make a decision. He's like, what do I do? I'm commander-in-chief. I need to, either resupply his guys or pull them out or do something to try and make, the best decision I can. Well, the Confederate general, P.T.G. Beauregard, a guy from Louisiana, if you can't tell by the name, sent all his aides to Anderson and says, hey, we need you to surrender. You're surrounded. you know, you got to, you know, basically you have to give up because we're surrounding you. We have guns targeted on you, and it's stuck. Okay. Anderson tried stalling for time and stalling for time and stalling for time, trying to drag out the negotiations, drag out the conversations to where Lincoln sends a ship in and bring more troops to station at Fort Sumter. Well, the Confederates then begin to shell Fort Sumter for 37 days straight. Now, the best part of this is that while they shell this thing for 37 days straight, no one dies. There's only one person killed. It's kind of a weird story about it. But this fort survives 37 days of shelling. And eventually they have to surrender just because they're out of ammunition, out of food, but have to surrender. Now, the only person that dies is actually killed while saluting the flag. As they're lowering their flag down, they fire a cannon and salute. And I guess the cannon backfired, something happened where that person got injured and died because of the saluting cannon. But now, obviously, the Confederacy has kind of won this first battle. This Fort Sumter has retired and has been given over to the Confederates. Now what happens? And so you can see images here of the bombs and stuff falling on Fort Sumter. You can kind of see where Fort Sumter is and how different guns were targeting Fort Sumter and lobbing shells at it. And Lincoln has to start getting ready for war now. So he calls for 75,000 troops. And you can kind of see, you know, this broad side here arguing for troops to come volunteer. He asks for volunteers, by the way, not for a draft, that kind of stuff. This is all for volunteers. And we'll kind of get into how this whole thing is going to get set up here. So many people have come out and volunteer for this. 75,000 people, that turned some away. People expect this war to not last very long at all. Now, he actually only requested one regiment from Wisconsin. That's 1,000 men. He had 10,000 people show up. And the biggest issue, they figured that the war would be over so quick. They said, you know what, 3-month hitch for the war because, you know, it's going to be quick, it's going to be easy, it's going to be done. And you know, all these people volunteer. And the question is, why do so many people volunteer? You got to think today, gosh, war is scary. War is a chance to die. Why would you go fight this thing? Well, we'll talk about that more in class. But the reason for the North is a lot of different things, okay? People left North to fight for adventure, first of all. Life was pretty boring. I mean, you worked, you slept, you ate, you did it all over again. And so going to war kind of provided this big change for the norm that they had to live every single day. Glory is a big part of this whole thing, too, because you know, people read novels and read books about heroes and that kind of deal. And here's your chance to go off to the world and, you know, be a big hero. Top it off, you're actually seeing someplace different and seeing some excitement that's going on. Some people are joining in slavery, but that honestly wasn't many. Honestly, a lot of people weren't very abolitionists. A lot of people were just mad about the Confederacy leaving. They're like, hey, you know what? That's not right. You can't do that. We're going to bring you back, kick in the street if need be, and save the Union. And one of the other part here was money. With the military, they had a guaranteed job. You had guaranteed money. You had guaranteed food, equipment, and clothing, all kind of stuff. Some people say, you know, I'm going to join because it pays. And it pays a lot of money, and things are good that way. Also, you get to travel around the country and see what's going on. You got a chance to, like talk about in the U.S.-Mexico War, you get a chance to leave your home and go see someplace different and new and exciting. And it's, you know, just a little different than what life normally is. So the South is a lot different. Now, some people say, oh, they all wanted slavery. That wasn't really true. Remember, most of your Southerners aren't actually slave holders. Biggest thing for them is that they felt their homeland was being invaded. Obviously, the North has to come into the South and take back the capital and take back the South. So they felt, hey, you know, the North is coming into our territory and taking us over. That's why if you go down south, often the Civil War is called the War of Northern Oppression or Northern Aggression, because the North is the one who does all the invading into the South. Also, you see 4 more states secede. Here's your Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas. And you have a couple of border states that are kind of like iffy. They're kind of kind of iffy here a little bit. You know what I mean? Will they secede or will they not secede? Eventually they won't, but there's a reason why for that. And so obviously kind of see different people here. Your Confederates in the North, Unionists in the South. There are a lot of different people different places. I mean, you have people brothers who are fighting on different sides of the war. You have friends who fight different sides of the war. You have towns where one half will fight for one side, the other will fight for the other side. And the big question is 4 Union slave states: Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. We talked a little bit about Washington, D.C. and where it's located right here on the border, and how if Maryland went slave, and went to the Confederacy, oh my gosh, it's going to be a bad thing because the U.S. Capitol is now in foreign territory. You're going to have to do stuff like, you know, move your capital, those kind of things to protect it. And so by the way, part of Virginia wants to go north, and they decided to make a brand new state of North Virginia or West Virginia. So it's kind of cool, actually, not gonna lie. And that's how we have West Virginia, because one part of the state who totally disagree with all the slavery idea. These were backcountry redneck hill folk who didn't have a lot of slaves, that kind of stuff. They didn't agree with the issue. They broke off and went away. So the big thing that they do here is as Tennessee and Virginia go south, these other states want to go south. Lincoln spends called habeas corpus. Now, habeas corpus is the idea that if you arrest somebody, you have to tell them why. You need a reason. I just can't go walk into a place, or an officer can't walk into a place and just arrest people at random. And so Lincoln basically suspended the idea of habeas corpus, and wanted to basically utilize that as a way to keep those people calling for those border slave states to go to the Confederacy to not go to the Confederacy. And you have these people called Copperheads, and we'll talk about Copperheads later on as well. There'll be a different term for this later. These are the Southern sympathizers in those bordering states. These are ones who are kind of like a poisonous snake, right? As from a northern perspective, were trying to convince people to go to the South. And there were a whole bunch in Maryland and other border states who were arrested for no reason except for being a Southern supporter. They found kind of some different charge to put them in jail. Now, with habeas corpus being suspended, it meant that they didn't have to have a reason to be in jail. So literally, if you were a Union Confederacy sympathizer or Confederacy backer, they threw you in jail, and that's all that happened. That's all it was. By doing this, and kind of by locking up people who were the Southern sympathizers, the Confederacy proponents, you, in a way, save Maryland, save Washington, D.C., and doesn't go to the South, and makes life a lot easier for the Union that way. So here's your final kind of line. You see, here's Washington, D.C., Delaware and Maryland stay north, Kentucky stays north, Missouri stays north, where Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia go south from those border states. Obviously, creating West Virginia out of this whole group is the other thing which we'll get to later on, because the people in that part of Virginia didn't feel the whole slave idea, and so they want to be part of this whole thing. Now, a lot of lingering questions about who's going to fight and who they are. So a lot of your fighters are young men, okay? Obviously, you see the people who signed up to fight here, and the people later on, the pictures of those who died in battle. One of the first U.S. wars is actually photographed, and so pictures from before and after are in papers and in documents a lot. You don't have a lot of pictures of the actual fighting, because with the way that the glass plate negative cameras worked, you had to sit still for a very long time, so action shots were darn near impossible. But a lot of times you got these before shots of guys all kind of palling around and stuff. You had the after shots of the battlefields. And for the North, a lot of these people were city folk. They weren't used to wilderness. They weren't used to camping or working out outside, that kind of dudes. They were industrial workers, farmers, that kind of stuff. These people weren't people who were used to the out backcountry kind of life. For the officers and these volunteer groups, meant you were the leaders of the community. Typically, even a place like Sauk City here, you have a rich person become the officer for a regiment or for a company, and they would recruit from the town. So typically, your town had everyone knew each other. The Sauk City Fire Department here in 1860s made the Sauk City Rifles, which was a group of soldiers that were all from Sauk City, and one of the rich guys became the officer and kind of paid to have the whole thing go. There was a group called the Baraboo Boys, same deal, where all the soldiers were from Baraboo, serving in Wisconsin units. And so you have these entire communities that join up together and fight together. Downside then is that when those units got decimated in battle, you have entire towns that lost a lot of people, which is kind of a downside for them. Now, for the southern people, a lot of them were farmers as well. They were very used to the outdoors, hunting, riding, fishing, all that kind of stuff, living outdoors, living in the territory where they would be fighting. And so they knew the territory much better. They were much better shots typically than the northerners were as well. And a lot more than that had military training, because a lot of the big military academies were located in the south. And so they had a better chance, kind of more military expertise than a lot of our northerners did. So the big question is, what is the North fighting for? Are they fighting for slavery, fighting for states' rights? Are they fighting for the Union? Why are you fighting? And so here you kind of see our break for the Union here. And typically it was breaking down to the idea of, we're fighting to save the Union, we're fighting to keep the South here, we're angry at the South for breaking off and leaving. And so there's a lot of reasons why I kind of fall into that, but that's kind of a lot of reasons where we see this happen. African Americans. So you have a lot of free African Americans in North at this point. You have 500,000 people, and they aren't allowed to fight yet. So early on, African Americans were not allowed in the army except for in roles for like maintenance and road work and that kind of stuff. And so it's a big question about African Americans. What kind of role they're going to play, and they're going to be used or not in the military. You have England and France. So obviously they're industrial powerhouses. Who are they going to back up? And if they had backed up the South, the Union might have been in a lot of trouble. And I leave you guys